Can ancient Egyptian burial grounds harbor living plague bacteria? How and why did the first Roman mummy appear? And who were King Tut's children? This is Infinity, and in this episode I'll show you some new finds in Egypt that scared scientists. Let's go! Plague of Cyprian. Over the past 15 years, the Egyptian city of Luxor has been actively excavated. Archaeologists were able to find several mummies buried in the 3rd century BC, but all of them were thickly covered with lime. This meant that in front of the scientists, there were the victims of the plague. The bodies were buried with such haste that not even half of the burial rituals known to historians were followed. But should we look further for bodies in this burial ground? We used to think that the worst plague epidemics took place in the Middle Ages, but even in the ancient world, the disease was just as troublesome. One of the most severe periods in ancient history was the Plague of Cyprian, an epidemic that broke out in the Roman Empire in the 3rd century BC. It was so named in honor of Saint Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage, who in his book called Mortality gave the most complete description of the symptoms of the disease. Perhaps archaeologists should reread this work and think twice before removing plague victims from their graves. Cones on the heads. Strange headdresses, which for many years were considered a figment of imagination of ancient Egyptian artists, turned out to be quite real. In the drawings that survive to our days, scientists noted that the heads of some ancient Egyptians were crowned with small cones. Especially often, they appeared in images made 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Now, for the first time, archaeologists have actually identified 2 such cones made of wax and decorating the heads of skeletons that are around 3,300 years old. The finds were excavated in the cemeteries of the city of Akhetaten, also known as Amarna. The excavations confirmed that 3-dimensional, wax-based head cones were sometimes put on the dead in ancient Egypt. By the way, they were not just on the elite people. The idea that the living people also wore these cones leaves questions. How often and why? It was believed that such unusual headdresses were worn by nobles. Most likely, these cones consisted of wax or solid fat mixed with incense. The material gradually melted, imparting an exquisite fragrance to the hair and skin of its wearer. There was, however, another hypothesis. Some scholars believed that the ancient Egyptians did not wear any cones. In fact, the cones were symbols to indicate a person's high status. In 2020, a sensational find was made by archaeologists in the ancient city of Saqqara. A total of 13 intact and sealed coffins were found by the scientists. The anthropomorphic sarcophagi were found in a mine which is 11 meters deep. Inside it, scientists also came across 3 sealed niches. These sarcophagi are around 2,500 years old. They're very well preserved and even still retain some of their original colors. It's noteworthy that the sarcophagi were neatly stacked on top of each other. This indicates that in ancient times they were moved from other tombs. This is a common practice in ancient Egypt. The priests often moved the coffins of important people to hiding places known only to them in order to protect them from tomb robbers. Initial studies have shown that throughout its history, the sarcophagi have never been opened. For the scientists, this is a great stroke of luck. In addition, additional studies have already been announced. Scientists believe that there may be other sarcophagi in the mine. But is it worth to open the sarcophagi that were in one of the most famous burial grounds of ancient Egypt? Surely, during the years of legal and illegal archaeological excavation, treasure and antiquity seekers have stumbled upon them more than once. But they decided to leave them sealed for some reason. Maybe there was a reason behind it all. By the way, did you know that mummies were not only made by the ancient Egyptians? For example, the first Roman mummy was recently found in Egypt. Who was she, and why was she buried in Egypt? Stay tuned to know more details and see other impressive Egyptian finds that are definitely worth checking out. Let's move on. The first Roman mummy. In 2010, a surprising find was discovered in a desert oasis in western Egypt. Among the many burials in the oasis, there was a strange sarcophagus. Presumably, the mummy of a woman was stored inside it. She was buried during the Roman rule in ancient Egypt, and it goes without saying, if you look at the sarcophagus, scientists believe that the find can be safely declared the first Roman mummy. The appearance of the sarcophagus is strikingly different from those that archaeologists have found before. The stone sculpture on the lid is more reminiscent of traditional Roman sculptures than the royal bas-reliefs of the Egyptians. Unfortunately, scientists were unable to find out anything about the identity of the buried woman. The mummy was richly dressed, but no distinctive symbols indicating her origin or profession were found in the sarcophagus. However, there is still a chance to shed some light on this mystery because scientists continue to excavate in the oasis. Who knows? Maybe soon we will know who was the first Roman mummy. The oldest village. We used to think that the ancient Egyptians were the creators of one of the first developed civilizations on our planet, but people inhabited the Nile Valley long before the builders of the pyramids came there, who were the predecessors of the pharaohs. A team of Egyptian and French archaeologists conducted extensive excavations in the Nile Delta to find the answer to this question. North of Cairo, they were able to find a chain of villages which presumably belonged to the Neolithic period. They're more than 7,000 years old. Unique finds indicate the presence of permanent settlements in the swampy areas of the Nile Delta from the 5th millennium BC. That is at least 2,500 years before the construction of the pyramids in Giza. Fragments of earthenware and stone tools were found at the site of the excavations. Scientists now hope to gain new information about the development of the irrigation system. Ancient Egyptians constructed artificial canal sleeves from the Nile, helping to supply crops with the necessary moisture in times of drought. So far, scientists think that the villagers did not have sufficient knowledge about irrigation and therefore depended heavily on the rains for their farming operations. Ark of the Covenant. The biblical events that we read about in the Holy Writings took place over 2,000 years ago. Some of the objects and artifacts mentioned in the Old and New Testament did exist and have even been found by scientists. It's not known how many of them are actually later forgeries, but now archaeologists are more interested in finding biblical artifacts that researchers of the past have never been able to find. One such artifact is the Ark of the Covenant. Described in the Old Testament, the sacred object was an ark in which the stone tablets of the covenant with the Ten Commandments were kept. It's believed that the Ark of the Covenant was seized by the Egyptians almost immediately after Solomon's death during an attack on Judea and taken by them to the city of Tanis in Egypt. It's this version that was the basis of Steven Spielberg's movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. No one knows exactly where the Ark may be kept. One can only hope that it can be stumbled upon by chance, and this hope is not without meaning. In 2020, near Jerusalem, in the ancient settlement of Beit Shemesh, archaeologists were excavating a temple that was 3,100 years old. They discovered a stone tablet in the temple that resembled the site of the Ark of the Covenant described in the Bible. Archaeologists working in Beit Shemesh had no idea they were dealing with one of the greatest shrines of antiquity. Excavations have been conducted since 2012, but a huge stone table was found only last year. But where's the Ark itself? The table is very close to the borders with Egypt, so the Ark may still be in the land of the pharaohs. The Screaming Mummy. The first screaming mummies were found in Egypt back in the 19th century. In the 1880s, archaeologists found several mummies in the royal necropolis of Deir el-Bahari near the city of Luxor, which for a long time could not be identified. But two screaming mummies were of particular interest to archaeologists. One belonged to a woman and the other to a man. For a long time, it was impossible to figure out what caused such a creepy look of these bodies. Moreover, such mummies were found later in the 20th and even 21st century. However, the creepy mystery remained unsolved. Many scientists put forward their versions and explanations, but no one had a sufficient evidence base. Fortunately, modern technology has allowed scientists to learn more about the mysterious mummies. In 2018, computed tomography came to the rescue. It showed the reason the screamers died of. It was also possible to determine their identity. Historians realized that the mummy of a man belonged to a person of royal blood. The results of the study showed that the buried man was the Prince Pentawar, son of the second pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, Ramses III. King Tut's children. For many years, the story of the two babies buried as mummies in the tomb of the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun remained a terrible mystery. However, recent research has been able to shed light on the reasons for this ritual. Scientists have long wondered whether the tiny mummies found in King Tut's tomb were prematurely born, the ruler's dead children, or perhaps sacrificial symbols of innocence to accompany him in his afterlife. DNA tests carried out in 2008 dispelled those doubts. They showed that the children were twins and that their father was a pharaoh. From a forensic standpoint, the results of the CAT scans and DNA tests are not entirely clear. Differences were found in the genetic material of the children. It was 99.7% identical, but not 100%, as it should be in the supposed case. Of course, some historians continue to doubt that King Tut's children were found in the tomb. However, many scientists believe that it is quite possible. That's all, guys. Do scientists need to open ancient graves, or is it better to leave the buried alone? What do you think? Let me know in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching, and see you later.